Okay, so welcome to the Active Listening workshop. My name's Amy. Can everyone see me, by the way? Yeah? Okay. That's great. For some reason, I can't actually see myself. And I'm just thinking that yeah, potentially when we share this video, I want people to be able to see me. But seeing as I am technical and deliverer, I don't know that that's all going to be possible today for me. So I'm going to carry on, and we'll stick with the slides instead. So in today's session, we are going to be looking at active listening, but we're going to come at it towards the end of the session, because there's a few things that, as I was reflecting on why we value active listening, why young people value that, there were a few things that I was thinking are really relevant for parents to think about first in order to be able to do active listening properly. So we're going to start by looking at self-care. I know it's something that's a term that's bandied around a lot in society, in social media. And I think a lot of parents think, oh gosh, yes, well, when am I going to do that? I've got washing, I've got my job, I've got this, that, and the other, children. And the reality is it's really difficult to squeeze in. But we're going to look at why it's worth finding some little moments where you can look after yourself. So we're going to start with that. We're going to look at resilience, and particularly the concept of relational resilience and why that's particularly important. Then we'll have a look at how to start a conversation, because choosing a moment with a young person can be quite difficult sometimes, and it's really good to just have a little bit of a pre-think about some of those difficulties before we actually approach those conversations. Then we're going to get to the active listening skills. Then I'm going to give you some signposting, some places to go if you need further information. Okay, so one quick little question here. Are your needs being met? I'd like those of you that have access to the chat to just pop in the chat for me a simple one-word answer. Yes, no, partially. I'll give you a moment to do that. Okay, we've got 2 no's, 3 no's, 4 no's. There's 5 people in this today. So, and I might be the 5th. So I would say, for me, partially, but some days very definitely a no. No, 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 no. Okay, it's a clear no. We're going to come back to this in a minute. I don't think that's unusual that it's such a strong no, but I think that's really important that we all absorb that we're not the only ones where our needs are not getting met. And we're going to come back to this. You can't pour from an empty cup. Take care of yourself first. It comes back to the idea of, on a plane, if something's happening, you have to put your oxygen mask on first, because if you can't stay alive, if you can't breathe, you can't help your children. It's the same principle. As parents, we have so many stresses and so many pressures on our backs that if we start to go under, if our mental health starts to dip, if our physical health starts to dip and take a real hit, it's really difficult for us to be present for our young people, to be patient enough, to be thoughtful, kind enough to give back to them. So 3 reasons that I see that self-care is actually crucial, not a luxury, but an essential item, is 1, just basically that you matter and you're actually entitled to meet your needs. You matter as much as anybody else. The second thing is that you can better support others if your own needs are met. And the third one that I actually think is a really important one that we often forget is that modeling self-care demonstrates to our children how they can be self-compassionate. So if they see us valuing ourselves, and if they see how we look after ourselves, then they see that that is a good model of how to be an adult. Even though sometimes we think they're not listening, they're ignoring us, XYZ, they are watching. And this is a good thing, positive thing that we can show our children. So I've got a very busy self-care poster here, which I find useful, because for me this highlights how multifaceted self-care can be and what it can look like. And in many ways it can look like things that we didn't realize would class as self-care. So obviously physically we often think, yes, we need some sleep, we need some exercise, we need to eat healthily, all those sorts of things we kind of know about, and a bit of rest as well. That's very difficult sometimes. Things like yoga, we all know the benefits of this sort of thing, but it's the difficulty is finding a space to fit it in. So for some people, getting up 10 minutes earlier in the morning and having a 10-minute yoga session targeted is actually the way to shoehorn something in. For someone else, it might be a walk at the end of the day, just before dinner, if you have a partner who's coming in at that time. Obviously for single parents it can be really difficult, and then it's about your support network, and if you have friends or neighbors or other family members who are willing to help you out and give you kind of 10 minutes, half an hour somewhere to do something, or whether you just use the good I was going to say the good old-fashioned, but that's completely the opposite of what I mean. Your friend occasionally, the screen time, and whether you use some of that in order to get the things that you need, your needs met as well. Then we've got our own emotional needs, self-care, managing our stress. So are there some new ways that we can integrate us to manage our own stress? Is it about learning a breathing technique, listening to a guided meditation before bed? And under this, we even classify forgiveness and compassion as a way that we can self-care. So I would say that as self-compassion, if we're actually forgiving ourselves for not being perfect, if we're forgiving ourselves because we flew off the handle and we know that was something else that made us do that and not the children, if we can forgive ourselves and be compassionate to ourselves, that's us self-caring too. Then we've got the social side of things. Social support systems are really helpful. Friends, peer support groups, positive social media. Sometimes you can find a group online that represents how you feel your experiences, and hearing kind of positive messages through them can be constructive and helpful. Spending time with those you love and actually being able to ask for help, whatever that looks like for you. Then we move on to the spiritual side of self-care. So that would maybe, and it doesn't have to be religion. It's more about thinking about, do you benefit from time alone? How much do you tend to need? When can you get that? Is it in the car to and from work? Is there a different time before bed where you can have that 20 minutes quietly yourself? Do you benefit from something like meditation, connecting with nature, or something like journaling, catching your thoughts, writing them down somewhere? And then there can be, if we move on to the next one, we can look at our personal development, things like our hobbies, the things that actually as a parent you tend to put right to the back of your mind when you become completely overwhelmed with life, jobs, and looking after everyone else's needs. And I certainly found that once my children became slightly older, I found myself going, well, I've got a little bit more spare time than I had before, and now I don't know what to do because I've forgotten what I like. I don't know. This is weird. So reconnecting with things that you used to like, or exploring new things, and meeting new people through that way as well. Getting to know yourself, the way that you act, you respond to things that work for you, things that maybe trigger you or upset you. So that's sort of self-development side of things, and sort of being aware of your personal identity and your true self, what's actually working for you. And then we look at the concept of space. So this is like a physical space, or it's really relating to physical space, but it has that concept of safety in it. So somewhere that you feel safe as well as being physically safe. A healthy living environment where it's an emotionally safe place to live, that actually it's not full of stresses for you. And if it is full of stresses, is there a way to look at what those stresses are, and if any of them can be managed, can be adapted or tweaked to just reduce the amount of sort of frustrations, barriers there are to you being able to feel you can take that time for yourself. Then there's financial self-care. Now in this climate, that's a real important one. Saving has been difficult. Budgeting is completely vital for many families, and money management. Splurging, I mean, it's very difficult sometimes you want to treat yourself sometimes, but actually it's not always the best way to keep yourself and your family afloat. And what I would suggest on this one is, if that's something that you'd like to work on, then it might be worth potentially connecting with some other charities that help support around financial matters, debt management. Citizens Advice Bureau are really good with things like that, so that you can release yourself from some of that financial stress that you might be carrying. And then work as well. So when we work, we can also be conscious of how we can self-care. Making sure that we actually do have some boundaries wherever's possible about how long we work, where we work. Obviously, it's different in different workplaces, and sometimes you have to go where the money is, where you're being paid. But wherever possible, if you can get yourself to a workplace that feels positive and supportive for you, where you have an investment in your learning at work, where you're valued enough and you given breaks that you deserve and that legally are entitled to, that can be a way of making sure that you're being looked after in that sphere as well. So that's just to really give you a bit more of a broad overview about how many ways you can just think about bringing self-care into your day. Okay, I just want you to have a very quick think then, potentially in yourselves. You don't have to put anything in the group chat, about what could you do, having looked at some of those things, what could you do to help yourself meet your needs? So just maybe identify what's the most pressing need for you that is not being met. What is a thing that if you could click your fingers and have that need met tomorrow, what would that be? Would it be that you were able to go for that run? Would it be that you were actually able to just lie still quietly in a room for 10 minutes? And I just want you to kind of keep that and make a mental note or write it down or something, and just think about some of those areas that we were thinking about. Is there a way that you think you can give yourself that gift? Okay, I'm going to leave you with that one to work on that. Right, we're going to move on to having a little look at resilience, because when our cup is not empty, when our cup is full or just somewhere in the middle, it does help us to be more resilient ourselves as individuals. When we talk about the concept of resilience, we tend to imagine and think that it's about bouncing back, an individual's ability to bounce back from a period of adversity. But it's a bit more multidimensional than that. There's also elements that are about relationships, about our place in the community, and about how we feel in terms of the culture that we sit within. So research recently has actually shown that during a time of adversity, the relational, communal, and cultural aspects of resilience account for more of an individual's ability to be resilient. So when we think about how can our child be more resilient, actually it would be much more useful to think, how can we support our child to be more resilient through the relationship that we have with our child, through the way our child connects to the community around it, either at school or in a outside school club or in the local neighborhood, so they feel that sense of belonging and value. And how do they feel in terms of the culture around them? Are they accepted? Often when we're talking about school avoidance, a lot of these young people don't feel that the culture is accepting of where they are. There's very much a feeling that they're not good enough, that there's something wrong with them and they need to change. And I think that if that culture was to shift and a different understanding was to be palpable for young people, that actually that would help them to feel more resilient to withstand the difficulties that they were facing. So we just wanted to introduce those other concepts and why it's important to think more broadly about resilience. So I do have a video here. Brene Brown, I think, is brilliant, and she has a short clip on empathy. So I'm just going to see if this will play for us. We're going to watch this quickly if this works. Fab, can you see this new screen in YouTube?
With Miro, you can show your team, not just tell them. Miro is a shared
and the big
canvas
question is,
which
can you hear it?
Wherever,
can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear it?
Through walls of text. Use Miro to create diagrams, embed documents.
Right, I've lost people's faces. Right, sorry, can you give me a thumbs up again if you can hear it? Okay,
so
thank you.
And why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, I'm down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, No, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. Oh, at least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
Right. I'll just get back to our PowerPoint. So I love that clip because it is a brilliant prelude to active listening and the importance of connection, and why connection is the key to a young person feeling that they can trust you, that they are seen, that they can be in a safe space, listened to in a safe space. And that's really what active listening is about. So when we're thinking about starting these conversations, we want to be thinking about a good time. When is a good time for that young person? Oh, we've just gone that way. Are they feeling stressed about the day that they've had? Because if they're at all in a kind of stressed brain state, then that's not a good time. If it's their very, very sleepy time of day, then that's not going to be a good time. In a way, I often think that the best time for these conversations is at the point when you are connecting with them already. So it might be that you're already doing something together, making a cake or going to take the dog for a walk. And if you're already on that wavelength when you're kind of connected in the activity you're doing, then maybe that's a natural opening and a good time to start that conversation. For some young people, it might be about choosing the method of communication, because particularly for some autistic young people, they find a face-to-face conversation completely overwhelming. So actually working out if they work better via a text message conversation or just doing some online messenger, but considering what works best for them might well make the difference between that conversation starting or not at all. And then the other thing that is important to consider is confidentiality. So when a young person opens up to us, they often feel worried about what we're going to do with that information. So in the past, young people have said to me, I don't talk to my parents because they tell their friends, and their friends' daughters or sons are my peer group, and I don't want them knowing. So as parents, even though we need to be able to talk about our reaction to what's going on, we need to make sure that whoever we're talking to, however we are having that support conversation for ourselves, that we're still honouring our young people's right for confidentiality, because they may not choose to talk to us, or they may choose not to talk to us if we're not putting that first. And then some conversation starters that can be useful are things like, I've noticed that, fill in the blank, you've been looking really down today or the last few weeks. How are you feeling about this? Is this something you've noticed? Or you might try, I wonder if you're worried about going to school because. So if sometimes your child shrugs their shoulders and goes, I don't know, sometimes you can take a guess at what they might be feeling or why they might be feeling this. I wonder if you're worried about going to school because the last time you went in, the year 10 pupil called you a nasty name, whatever that situation is for your young person. And it gives them then the opportunity to go, no, that doesn't bother me at all. No, the reason I don't want to go in is X. And then you also have an option of something like, you don't seem like your usual self. How have you been feeling lately? So lots of things that work on observation that gives the young person a chance to agree or dispute with what you've noticed. But you can own that statement, because even if they are not feeling a certain way, your observation of their behavior or themselves looking different is still, that belongs to you. So if you get to a point then where the conversation does open up and they choose to say, well, yeah, I have been feeling bad this last couple of weeks. I don't know why, or this happened and I just don't want to go to school anymore. The first thing we need to do is to praise our child for sharing how they feel in whatever way they've been able to do that. So you might choose a phrase like, you've done the right thing telling me this, or you're doing so well to tell me about these difficult feelings, because it can be completely draining and overwhelming for a young person to think about how to start a conversation. It's not an easy conversation to just drop into the conversation generally. to drop into the room. And it might be, and often young people say to me, they don't want to burden their parents. They don't want to worry their parents. Their parents have got enough on their plates. So reassuring your child that they've done the right thing by trusting you and opening up can really help them to continue that conversation with you. So then after you've done the praise, you want to be able to empathise with how your child might be feeling. So what Brene Brown was talking about in the video, connecting to that experience rather than trying to problem solve, or rather than trying to move them off or on from where they're feeling. Empathise with how that is for your child and what they've been experiencing. It sounds like that really frightened you. How did you feel when that happened? You know, and like the bear, getting down into the cave, into the hole with them and seeing how difficult that is for them. And I feel like what's useful sometimes is to think about a time when you've really felt someone has actually listened to you, where you've had an experience yourself of someone really seeing you and where you're at. And it's not those conversations where someone will say, oh, that's really rubbish. If you do this, that'll make you feel better, or la, 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 you'll be all right tomorrow, or da, da, da. Those are not the conversations we remember as powerful. The ones we remember as powerful are when people are actually really listening. They get what we're feeling. And actually we can walk away when we've had a conversation and we've given that to someone else, that feeling, we can walk away feeling much lighter. And it's actually sometimes more difficult for the person who's just had that conversation given to them, because you feel like you're not making a difference. But I think we have to trust in that process, that is actually really beneficial for the person who's having that listening experience. So once we've done our kind of connecting and that bit of empathizing, we want to be able to explore the experience that our young person's having with curiosity and openness. So what a lot of young people tell us is that they absolutely close down if there's a hint of judgment. So if someone is saying, well, I'm not really sure that you should be doing X, that makes them want to stop talking. Why should I be doing this? You don't get it. You're not listening. So wherever possible, we need to try to put any kind of natural instinct to make a judgment, even if we think we want to kind of help nudge up a young person what we think is the right direction. We need to try and hold that back for a minute. Explore what their experience is with curiosity and with openness. So what's been happening lately? How long have you been feeling like this for? What else do you think is connecting to this? Is there something else that's making you feel this way? What happened when you had that conversation with this person? Because often a young person, when they're in the middle of an experience, and even an adult, I know myself sometimes when I'm in the middle of having an experience that I'm struggling with, I actually need to talk about it in order to understand it. I can't always do that mental work myself. So what you're kind of scaffolding that young person in that conversation to get a better understanding of themselves and what's happening. And then we want to, when we've listened, when we've helped our young person to explore, we want to reflect back to our child our understanding of what they've told us. So something like, you said that you've been feeling really anxious about school in the last month. Can you tell me more about that? What sorts of places are you feeling more anxious? Who makes you feel more anxious? Is there a lesson that you find more difficult? So our reflections of what we understand can often lead to then more questions and an extension of the exploration. So it's a kind of, we don't necessarily go through one at a time all of these things. We might circle back and come back to praising them for what they've done, and then we might go back into the empathy and the exploring. You might say something like, it sounds like you feel really worried because now that your friend has moved schools, you feel really isolated and lonely. I wonder if there's anything else that is impacting you, or whether this is really what's hitting you the most and you're feeling sad about your friend leaving. So making sure you give them the option to go, yes, absolutely, that's exactly what I feel like, so that they know that you've listened and they know that you've heard. Or whether it gives them an opportunity also to say, well, yes, I do feel sad, but it's not the only thing. Actually, what's also going on is, and then they can correct you and continue to expand. So you're looking on different ways of continuing that conversation, continuing to expand on your and their understanding. So obviously in many conversations that you'll have, it will be something that you can contain within that conversation. There may be a point at which you get to a kind of problem solving area where you say, okay, well, you know, what do you feel you need here? Do you need to talk through some options, or has this been useful just to talk about it? So you might move into problem solving territory, but you might also find yourself, depending on what your child said, in a position where you're actually worried about something they've told you. You're maybe worried about their safety or the safety of someone else. In which case, obviously, it's really important for you to model being open and honest, and to share with your child the fact that something they have said does concern you, and you need to explore the options for that. So, for instance, you might want to say, I'm worried about you and I want to make sure you're safe. Or what's happening isn't okay, and I think you deserve to be supported with this. Depending on what they've said, it might be that you actually need to place some boundaries in the home for them or around school. Or it might be that you feel someone else that they've mentioned actually needs safeguarding themselves, in which case you might say, I need to speak to an adult about how to keep this person safe. And I think the key there is to make sure that you're just being open and honest with them, so that they can see the process you're going through and why you're doing that. And then obviously, once you have a conversation up and running, it can be difficult to think about how to and when to close that down. So you might want to check in with how they're feeling. And often conversations will come to a bit more of a natural point at which they've sort of wound up. So you might want to check in with how they're feeling. Something like, I just want to see how you're feeling. We've been talking for a while. How are you feeling now? And they might well say, I feel a bit better now that I've spoken to you about this. Or you might say something like, you've done really well talking to me about this. Shall we take a break for now and talk again tomorrow, or talk again next Sunday, whatever it is that you think will work, so that you're leaving them that space to come back to, and signposting to them, you will check in with them again, but you're letting them decide whether they've had enough or whether they just want to talk a little bit more. But you're waiting for them to give you that signal on what they feel they need the most. And then what you might want to do is just summarize the conversation and any agreed actions. So that might look something like, okay, so you've told me about school and about what's been going on. You've told me that you would like me to speak to your head of year and arrange to talk about some options that we can work out. So I will do this tomorrow, and you're going to go and play on your PlayStation and just switch off for a little bit. It might be also that you want to just reiterate that you respect their right to confidentiality, and that anything that has been said in that conversation, you can remind them you will keep as confidential unless they give you that permission, or you need to, if it's a safeguarding risk, share that with someone else. But again, that's something you can talk to them about. Okay. So before we move on to signposting, were there any questions about any of the active listening content there? Okay. Right, so what we offer at Newport Mind are a few different things. We do offer one-to-one and family-based support, which is operated on a referrals basis. And if anyone feels like they would be interested in exploring that for themselves, their young person, then if you email cypf@newportmind.org and request a referral form, we can get one sent through to you. In terms of other support at Newport Mind for yourself as a parent, we do monthly peer support coffee mornings, where it's a lovely way to get together with other parents in a similar position. We have a team of really experienced, very supportive, lovely volunteers that attend the meetings as well. So there's lots of people to be able to connect with, talk through your situation with. And we're also doing the virtual workshops every other month. So I'll continue to send details about that. If any of you are not on the emailing list, but you'd like to be, then please feel free to email me at amy.valentine@newportmind.org, and I can add you to the list so you find out directly about the next workshop. Signposting in terms of more kind of general places, Young Minds and Anna Freud Centre are two really brilliant websites and organisations that have pages of information for young people, for parents and carers, and also for schools often and professionals. They do lots of research. They have lots of things like blogs made by young people. So it's a really lovely resource. Both of their websites have lovely resources that you could look through with your young person, or direct your young person to, or look through yourself as a parent. And we always like to share the Childline number because it's very easy to remember, 0800 1111. Obviously, Childline now also has a fantastic website, and a lot of the work they do is on Messenger, and they're now open 24/7 again. So they're a fantastic place that has trained counsellors ready for children at all times of the day and night. Then we've got the text service Shout 85258. And then we always recommend, if you're worried about your young person's safety, then if it's in working hours, we'd advise you go to the GP. And if it's out of working hours and you feel you can't keep them safe, then it's going to A&E. And then I just wanted to leave you all with this quote. Much of today's popular advice to parents ignores emotion. Instead, it relies on child-rearing theories that address children's misbehaviour, but disregards the feelings that underlie that misbehaviour. The ultimate goal of raising children should not be simply to have an obedient and compliant child. Most parents hope for much more for their children. And I like that one because I think it just highlights the fact that actually when we are raising our children, we're raising them not just to be obedient and compliant. And often when our children turn around and say no, that they can't do something, then that's down to us. It makes our lives more difficult, but it's down to us then to look at what are the feelings that are underlying this. And I would take out miss and just see that as behavior. What are the feelings underlying this behavior? Sometimes they're able to talk and explore that. Other times we have to be a bit playing the detective to find that out. But that's what are the things we just have to do. And we're here to support all parents in that process, in doing just that. Okay, so we have the questions now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the recording, and then that will allow everyone to be able to ask questions freely.